In our 5th year in Los Angeles, my wife, Isabella, brought her first love and his daughter straight to our home. Leo and Annie just got here, so they'll be staying with us for a while, she announced. That led to a massive fight between us, on my birthday of all days. Isabella slid a set of divorce papers in front of me. Just sign them, she urged. Leo needs a green card, so we'll just get a sham divorce for now. I frowned, trying to understand what she was asking, but she just pointed a finger in my face and accused me of having no compassion. Not long after, I saw Leo's post on Twitter. Isabella is divorcing from me and my child. We finally have a place to call home. I quietly liked the post, signed the divorce papers, and then submitted a transfer request at work to move back home. My manager was surprised when he received my request. Davis, you worked so hard to build a life here in LA. Why do you want to move back now? I looked down and forced a wry smile. My parents are back in Denver. It's better for me to be there. Just then, Isabella pushed the door open and walked in. She overheard me, and her brow furrowed slightly. Who's moving back? She asked. I didn't answer her, finishing my conversation with my manager before hanging up the phone. When I turned around, I saw Isabella's dark eyes fixed on me. Who did you just say was moving back? She demanded. I gave a vague reply. A colleague of mine is putting in for a transfer. A sarcastic smile played on Isabella's lips. For a second there, I thought you were the one applying to leave, she said. But that's silly. You worked so hard to be with me. You'd never have the heart to leave. As she spoke, she wrapped her arms around my waist. Honey, once Leo gets his green card, let's have a baby, okay? Isabella was always like this with me, mixing cruelty with a little bit of affection to keep me in line. But this time, I wasn't interested in the sweet little prize she was offering. I pushed her away gently and said in a cold voice, Let's talk about the future when we get there. Isabella froze for a moment when she heard that. Then her tone softened. It's a little strange that you're not fighting with me, she said. I thought you'd be ready for an all-out war over this. Her choice of words felt incredible. A husband and wife, fighting to the bitter and over an outsider. I let out a soft, humorless laugh. We've had this fight so many times, I said. I'm just tired. Hearing this, Isabella immediately started complaining about all the times I'd argued with her about Leo in the past. She said I was never considerate of her feelings. She claimed that every fight we had broke her heart. Isabella was always like that. Give her an inch, and she'd take a mile. Whenever I conceded, even a little, she would push her advantage as far as she could. So for all these years, I was always the one making concessions. She mentioned wanting to move to the coast, so I left my family behind and requested a transfer to the LA office. She said she wasn't ready for kids, so I took all the pressure from our parents, telling them it was my decision. But in the end, all of my sacrifices meant less than a single word from Leo. I stood up and looked at her quietly. I won't argue with you anymore. Isabella looked at me with a smug expression. Good. Leo and I are just friends, so you can stop being so jealous. And if there was something more, I finished her sentence for her. If there was something going on between us, you wouldn't even be in the picture. I had heard her say that line countless times before. Isabella nodded, satisfied. I'm glad you finally understand, I said flatly. I should have understood a long time ago. I should have known that in Isabella's heart, I wasn't worth a fraction of what Leo was. Just then, a small voice called out from the other side of the door. Mommy, Mommy, cried the little girl. Come play house with me. Daddy's no fun. Isabella instinctively stood up and called back to her. As she was about to leave the room, she turned back to me. I'm just going to play with Annie for a bit. She's just a little girl, and Leo. I cut her off. You don't have to explain. I trust you. Isabella paused for a second, then simply said, Good, and walked out the door. Leo's daughter had been calling Isabella Mommy since the day she arrived. I had tried to tell Isabella how much it bothered me. In response, she had pointed her finger at me and yelled, Davis Miller, how can you be so heartless? Annie is just a little girl, and it's tragic enough that she doesn't have a mother. Every time I heard Annie call her mommy, a knot would form in my stomach. But this time, I felt nothing at all. I placed a hand over my heart. A wide smile spread across my face. It turned out that once you decide to stop loving someone, they can no longer hurt you. From outside the room, I could hear the constant sounds of laughter and playing. Every so often, Annie would call out, "Mommy," and each time Isabella would answer in a gentle voice. As I listened to them, I started planning my next move. I'm not sure how much time passed before my phone rang. It was my mom. She asked carelessly if I'd had a special birthday meal. Had I at least eaten some cake? Her words reminded me that I hadn't eaten a single thing all day. Before we hung up, my mom asked hesitantly when I might come home for a visit. In the 5 years since moving to LA, I could count the number of times I've been back on one hand. At first, it was because my career wasn't stable yet. Later, it was because Isabella said traveling back and forth was too much of a hassle. I just stepped out of the bedroom when Annie suddenly hurled a toy at me. "Bad man, what are you doing in my house?" She shrieked. "Are you trying to take my mommy away again?" Before I could say a word, Leo rushed over and bowed his head in apology. "I'm so sorry, Davis. Annie's just a kid. Please don't take it personally." Isabella, standing nearby, said with a stern face, "It's not a big deal. You don't need to apologize. Besides," she added, "the only reason Annie acts this way is because he scared her before." As she spoke, she moved to shield Leo and his daughter behind her. "Davis Miller, you're not actually going to pick a fight with a 5-year-old girl, are you?" she challenged. "Because that would be pathetic." I hadn't said a single word, yet somehow I was the one at fault. "You guys carry on," I said. "I just came out to grab something." With that, I opened the refrigerator door. I realized the cake I had made for myself earlier was gone. I glanced over at the living room coffee table. There was a mangled wreck of a cake. Isabella noticed me looking and said casually, "Oh, was that your cake?" Annie said it tasted bad, so she just left it there. "If you want one, I can buy you another." I picked up what was left of the cake I had so carefully prepared and dropped it into the trash can. "No, thank you," I said flatly. Then I walked out the front door. I hadn't gone more than a few steps when Isabella ran out and grabbed my arm. "Davis, where are you going?" she demanded. I looked at her, confused. This was the first time she had ever left Leo's side to come after me. "Why did you follow me?" Isabella seemed taken aback by my question. In the past, seeing her run after me would have made me ecstatic. I would have forgiven her for anything she'd done. Isabella's composure seemed to crack, as if she couldn't believe how cold my reaction was. I just saw you leaving without a word and wanted to see where you were going," she stammered. I just grunted in response. "I'm going to find something to eat." Just then, Leo walked over with Annie. "Davis, Annie just said she's craving some Korean barbecue. Why don't you join us if you don't mind?" he offered. It can be my way of apologizing. I'm not a fan of. Before I could finish my sentence, Isabella accepted for me. Then she told me to go get the car. Since I had already decided to leave, I didn't want to start another fight with Isabella. I just did as she said and went to the garage. When I pulled the car around, I saw that Isabella had naturally settled into the back seat with Leo and Annie. She didn't seem to notice the issue until I started the engine. Then she turned to me and explained a little nervously, "Annie is still little and she's very attached to me. So I glanced in the rearview mirror at the perfect picture of a happy family in the back seat and cut her off impatiently. It's fine. You're better off back there anyway. The passenger seat is the most dangerous spot in the car." My words seemed to stun Isabella into silence. She had, after all, said the exact same thing to me once. It was during an argument we had about that very seat. "What's the big deal about the passenger seat?" she had said, annoyed. "It's not even safe." For the rest of the drive, I felt like a chauffeur watching the family in my back seat laugh and joke around. When we got to the restaurant, the three of them went inside ahead of me. By the time I parked the car and joined them, I found their table was set for only 3 people. Isabella looked at me, embarrassed, and was about to call the waiter over to add another place setting, but Annie suddenly burst into tears. "I don't want to eat with that weird man," she screamed. "Daddy said he's trying to take my mommy away." Leo quickly covered her mouth and shot me an apologetic look. "Davis, kids say the darndest things. Please don't take it to heart." Isabella pulled Annie into her arms and began to comfort her quietly. The way she looked at me, you would have thought I was the villain. I gave a small laugh and looked directly at Annie. "Don't worry, little one. Your mommy will always be your mommy. I would never try to take her away. My words caused the look in Isabella's eyes to shift dramatically. Before she could say anything, I turned, walked over to a small table in the corner, and sat down. I ate my meal alone. The sound of their laughter drifted over from their table. It didn't seem to affect my appetite in the slightest. I was already on my way home when I got a call from Isabella. "Davis, where are you? We're done eating. You can wait for us in the parking lot," she said, so matter-of-factly. I couldn't fathom how little she must think of me. After the way they had just treated me, did she really expect me to give them a ride home? "I'm already home," I said calmly. My reply made Isabella furious. "Davis Miller, what is that supposed to mean? We all came together. Why would you leave on your own?" I replied calmly. "Aren't you all going to the movies?" That stopped her short, leaving her speechless. Before I had even left the restaurant, I had seen Leo's new post on Twitter, the movie Annie has always wanted to see with her mom and dad. Today, her dream finally came true. The post included a photo of the three of them together. A friend had commented, "You two are finally together. So happy for you guys. Congratulations." Leo had replied with a blushing emoji. Isabella was silent for a few seconds before saying defensively, "We could have all gone to the movies together. You're always saying I never go to the movies with you." I just smiled and said without a hint of hesitation, "That's not necessary. I hope you enjoy the show." Then I hung up the phone. I didn't care how she reacted on the other end. When I got home, I saw an email from HR. My transfer request to the Denver office had been approved. They asked me to wrap up my affairs in Los Angeles as soon as possible. It was the first piece of good news I'd had in a long time. When Isabella got home, I was in the middle of organizing my work files for the handover. She was clearly still fuming about my attitude on the phone. She grabbed a change of clothes and went straight to the bathroom without a word. By the time she came out, I was already in bed with my eyes closed, pretending to be asleep. Isabella stood by the side of the bed, staring down at me. I could feel her intense gaze, even with my eyes shut. I was starting to get annoyed by the staring when my phone rang. "Davis, hey, isn't it your birthday today? The company sent over a little something for you." I just dropped it off. My manager's booming voice was crystal clear in the quiet room. I watched Isabella's expression grow more and more uncomfortable as she listened. After I hung up, I got out of bed and went to the door. I thanked my manager, who was waiting outside, and brought the gift basket inside. When I came back in, I saw Isabella standing with the refrigerator door open, searching for something. I glanced over, set the basket on the counter, and headed back to the bedroom. A moment later, Isabella came into the room and said, "We're out of pasta. I was going to make you." I cut her off with a loud yawn. "Don't worry about it. I'm full from dinner." The anxious look on her face deepened. "I forgot it was your birthday. I'm so sorry." I said dismissively, "It's fine. It's just another day. It doesn't make a difference." With that, I turned off the light and rolled over to sleep. I slept soundly without a single dream. For the next few days, Isabella started coming to our bedroom at a reasonable hour each night. But I was completely absorbed in preparing for my job transfer and paid her no attention. I thought this new, quiet arrangement might actually last until the day I left. But one afternoon, while I was cleaning out the office, I found a medical report confirming a pregnancy. The name on the report was Isabella Thompson. The date was from 2 months ago. I froze. I started tearing the office apart, pulling open drawers and going through boxes. Finally, in the very bottom drawer of the filing cabinet, I found it. A consent form for an abortion. The form stated the fetus was 10 weeks along with a detectable heartbeat, and at the bottom, on the signature line, was the name Leo Carter. The last bit of hope I'd been clinging to finally died in that moment. Any part of my resolve that had softened over the past few days turned to stone. I took the consent form and the divorce papers Isabella had given me and walked out into the living room. Isabella and Leo were on the couch watching a movie. Before she even had a chance to ask what I was doing, I held the consent form out to her. Isabella glanced down at the paper, and her face contorted in panic. "Davis, honey, please let me explain," she pleaded. "It's just, Annie is so little, and I couldn't be that cruel to her." Her words made me laugh, a bitter, self-deprecating sound. "Getting rid of your own child for someone else's," I said. "Isabella, you're the cruel one here." Isabella's face grew paler with every word I spoke. her lips trembling as she struggled to find a response. I stared at her coldly and held out the divorce papers. "Isabella, let's get a divorce," I said. "I've already signed my part. You don't need a sham divorce anymore. I'm making it real for you." My words made Isabella's eyes go wide. "Divorce?" she asked, her voice trembling. "Davis, you want to divorce me?" I held up the papers, showing her my signature at the bottom. Isabella snatched the agreement from my hand and ripped it into pieces. "I will not divorce you," she yelled. "We can have another baby later. Honey, please, let's not do this." Beside her, Leo suddenly dropped to his knees in front of me. "Davis, I'm so sorry. This is all my fault," he cried. "Isabella only did it because of Annie. If you're going to be angry at anyone, be angry at me." I grabbed him by the collar, hauled him to his feet, and punched him squarely in the face. Leo staggered back, holding his jaw and staring at me with resentment in his eyes. But he didn't do anything. "Did you really think I'd just stand by and take it like I always have?" I snarled. Maybe it was the look in my eyes, but for the first time ever, Leo actually looked down and avoided my gaze. Isabella instinctively moved to stand in front of Leo, shielding him. "This is between you and me," she said angrily. "Don't drag him into it. Getting the abortion was my decision. Don't blame him for it. I just couldn't bear the thought of my pregnancy making Annie feel insecure all over again." Her supposedly selfless explanation was so absurd, I almost laughed. I couldn't stop myself from yelling, "Isabella, that was a child too. That was our child." For a fleeting moment, a flicker of guilt crossed her face, but it vanished as quickly as it appeared. That baby wasn't even born yet. It wasn't even a person. It didn't know anything, she argued. But Annie is a real, living little girl. I couldn't be selfish. Why can't you understand that? Her logic was so twisted, it actually made me think that maybe it was for the best her child was never born. A child growing up in a family without love would never be happy. At that thought, the fire in my chest began to cool. I glanced at the scraps of paper on the floor, then looked up at Isabella, who was still standing there looking so self-righteous. "I'll have my lawyer draw up another copy of the papers," I said quietly. "He'll mail them to you." Isabella grabbed my arm, her voice pleading. "We can still have another baby. As soon as Leo and Annie move out, we can have a child of our own, I promise." Before I could respond, a sudden shove from behind sent me stumbling to the floor. Annie's small, furious voice rang out from behind me. "Bad man. You're trying to take my mommy away," she screamed. "You're bad. Get out of my house." The moment the words left her mouth, she threw the glass she was holding directly at my head. I didn't have time to react before it smashed against my forehead. I felt a warm trickle of blood run down my face. Seeing what happened, Leo, fearing I might retaliate, quickly scooped Annie into his arms. "Davis, I'm so sorry. She just got scared. She's only a kid," he pleaded. "Please don't be mad at her. I'll pay for any medical bills." Before I could even respond, Isabella chimed in. "Davis, she's just a little girl. You can't let this ruin her." I looked at the three of them, a perfect little unit, all protecting each other from me, and I let out a quiet laugh. I staggered back to my feet and looked at Isabella. The look in my eyes, which had always been filled with love for her, now held nothing but a deep, profound disappointment. The change in my expression seemed to finally get through to her. She let go of Annie and rushed toward me. "Honey, are you okay? Let me see the cut. I'll bandage it for you." I pushed her away firmly. "Isabella," I said in a cold, hard voice, "this divorce is happening, and I want all of you out of this house as soon as possible." With that, I pressed a hand to my bleeding forehead and turned to leave. But before I reached the door, I felt a sharp, slicing pain in my arm. I looked down at my arm. A long, deep gash had appeared. Bright red blood was already welling up and dripping from the wound. I turned to see Annie standing there, her face twisted in a snarl, brandishing a kitchen knife. "You're a bad man," she screamed. "You want to make us leave? Go away and die." She lunged at me again with the knife. I shoved her, sending her sprawling to the floor. Isabella immediately rushed to Annie's side, helping her up. "Davis Miller, have you lost your mind?" she shrieked at me. How could you lay a hand on a child? She's just a little girl. She doesn't know what she's doing. Ignoring the stinging pain in my arm, I physically forced them all out of the house. Worried about Annie, Isabella, and Leo didn't have time to argue. They just grabbed the girl and rushed to the hospital. I don't know how much later it was that I finally went to the emergency room myself. The doctors saw the wound, which had stopped bleeding by then, and scolded me for not taking care of myself. They told me I should have come in much sooner. As I was leaving the hospital, I ran right into Isabella and Leo, who was carrying a sleeping Annie. Isabella's eyes immediately fell on my bandaged arm and forehead. A flicker of concern crossed her face, and she opened her mouth as if to say something. But just then, Leo spoke up. "Isabella, you two should talk. I'll come to the house tomorrow to pack our things and move out," he added. "I could take care of Annie on my own. I shouldn't be disrupting your lives." With that, he turned to leave. But just as he did, Annie, who had been fast asleep, suddenly woke up and started crying for her mommy. Isabella looked conflicted for a moment, then turned to me with an apologetic expression. "Davis, why don't you head home first? I'll come back tomorrow, and we can talk properly." "I'm not going to agree to a divorce," she added firmly. "And we don't need a sham one anymore, either." After saying this, she took Annie from Leo's arms and began to soothe her with soft words. As I walked away, Leo glanced back at me over his shoulder. His eyes were filled with smug triumph. I went back to the house, a place filled with so many memories. The pain I had been suppressing for so long finally came rushing to the surface. I had bought this house during our second year in LA. I had picked out every single piece of furniture myself. I remember thinking that this was going to be our forever home, so it had to be perfect. On the day we moved in, Isabella had hugged me, giddy with excitement. She said we finally had a real home of our own and that we would live here forever. I never imagined we would end up going our separate ways. As I walked past the office, I noticed a dusty jigsaw puzzle box in the corner. The image on the box was a photo of Isabella and me. We had planned to complete it and hang it in the most prominent spot in our living room. But we had only ever finished half of it. One day, Annie had said she didn't like it, and after that, Isabella had never touched the puzzle again. I took the puzzle out to the backyard. I lit a match and watched as the box, and the picture of us on it, burned to ashes. My love for Isabella was turning to ash right along with it. I spent the next day packing all of my things into suitcases. The following morning, as I was getting ready to clean the house, Isabella walked in. She looked around at the half-empty living room and asked in a low voice, "Where did half the stuff in this house go?" I didn't answer her question. Instead, I asked when she was planning to come get the rest of her things. Hearing my question, Isabella's expression soured. "Davis, you saw how Annie was yesterday. I had no choice but to do what I did. Can't you try to understand? I couldn't hurt an innocent child just to be selfish." I nodded without even thinking about it. "Oh, I understand completely," I said. A smile began to form on Isabella's face, but it vanished as I continued. "That's why a divorce is the best option for everyone. If we get divorced, Leo can get his green card fair and square, and Annie won't have to lose her new mother. After all, every child needs a mom." Isabella started to argue, but I only ever wanted a sham divorce. "Why are you?" I cut her off without a second thought. "But I want a real one. Find some time to pack up your things and get them out of here," I said. Isabella opened her mouth to protest again, but I cut her off. "Isabella, there's a security camera in the living room. If you don't want Annie to get into any trouble, I suggest you sign the papers." Isabella clearly hadn't expected me to use Annie as leverage against her. She opened and closed her mouth a few times, but no words came out. In the end, she mumbled an excuse and practically ran out of the house. As I watched her retreating back, I didn't feel a single pang of regret. In fact, all I felt was irritation at her refusal to let go. For the next few days, Isabella seemed to be avoiding me, and I made no effort to contact her. Instead, I finished packing up the rest of the house and gave it a thorough cleaning. I called a real estate agent and put the house on the market. I wasn't surprised when Isabella showed up at the door the very next day. She stared at the packed suitcases by the door, a look of disbelief on her face. "Davis Miller, what is this?" she demanded. "Why are all my things packed?" I gave her a puzzled look. We're getting divorced, I said, as if it were obvious. Why would your things still be in my house? And don't worry, I added. I already threw out all those little trinkets of yours that I know you hate. I'm not divorcing you, Isabella insisted. Honey, I know I was wrong about the baby, but my heart was in the right place. I was just trying to help. You're not really mad at me, are you? You've always been so understanding. As she spoke, her voice grew weaker and less confident. By the end, she was practically whispering. I replied in a mockingly sympathetic tone, I completely understand your desire to help. And since Annie loves you so much, wouldn't it be perfect for you to be her new mom? Isabella shook her head frantically, grabbing my hand and insisting she would never be Annie's mother. I had a laugh at that. She wouldn't be Annie's mother, yet she let the girl call her mommy. She always claimed she had no feelings for Leo, yet she hurt me over and over again for his sake. Isabella, can you even say that with a straight face? Just as Isabella was about to respond, the doorbell rang. I assumed it was the real estate agent bringing someone by for a surprise showing. But when I opened the door, I found Leo and Annie standing on the porch. Annie shot me a dirty look, then ran past me to Isabella. Mommy, she cried, I missed you so much. Leo spoke up, a look of feigned guilt on his face. Sorry to bother you both. Annie has this one doll she can't sleep without, so I had to come by. I figured I could grab the rest of our things while I'm here. As he said this, he looked at me with a barely concealed smirk. He was clearly confident that I would never actually make him leave. And why wouldn't he be? In all our previous confrontations, I was always the one to back down. Every single time, I had been the one to give in to Isabella. But not this time. I gave him a sharp, knowing smile. I pointed to the pile of packed bags in the corner. Everything's already packed for you, I said, my voice light and cheerful. Feel free to take it all now. Leo's smile instantly vanished. He clearly hadn't expected things to go this way. Before he could come up with a response, I added, You should take Isabella's bags too. It'll be much more convenient now that you'll all be living together. The expression on Leo's face shifted from disbelief to a look of deep calculation. Annie, on the other hand, was thrilled and started tugging on Isabella's hand, trying to get her to leave. But Leo stopped her. Isabella lives here, sweetie, he said. Let's just go home by ourselves for now, okay? At his words, Annie immediately burst into tears. Leo scooped her up, grabbed his bags, and left without another word. I wasn't surprised. I had known for a long time that Leo didn't actually have feelings for Isabella. He was just looking for a free ride, a comfortable place to live without having to pay for it. And when Isabella found out he and his daughter had moved to the city, she had served herself up to him on a silver platter. After Leo left, it took a long moment for the reality of the situation to sink in for Isabella. She reached for my hand and said, her voice strained, Honey, I made them leave. Can we just go back to how things were now? Can we just live our lives together? Her eyes were filled with desperate hope. I let out a soft laugh, then picked up her suitcases and carried them outside, setting them on the porch. I stood in the doorway, looking at her. Isabella stared at me, her eyes boring into mine. When she finally realized I wasn't going to change my mind, her shoulders slumped in defeat and she walked away. A few minutes later, I got an iMessage from her. I'm not agreeing to this divorce, it read. We can talk again when you've had some time to cool off. The next day, I called a real estate agent and had him come over. I signed a listing agreement, giving him full authority to handle the sale of the house. That night, I took my suitcases to the airport and boarded a flight back home to Denver. When I showed up on my parents' doorstep with my luggage, they just stared at me for a moment, stunned. My mom's eyes welled up with tears. Davis, she said, her voice thick with emotion, what are you doing here? Why are you back? Even my dad, who never showed much emotion, had tears in his eyes. My mom pulled me inside and immediately started fussing over me, getting me food and drinks. Before I knew it, a steaming bowl of my favorite beef noodle soup was sitting in front of me on the kitchen table. My mom urged me to eat before it got cold. I devoured the entire bowl in what felt like seconds. I drank every last drop of the broth. My dad waited until I was finished before he asked, Why'd you bring so much luggage with you this time? I wiped my mouth with a napkin. I got tired of the food out on the coast, I said. So I put in for a transfer. My parents both froze, staring at me in disbelief. After a long moment, my mom asked, her voice hesitant, "You mean you're not going back to L.A.?" I put an arm around her shoulder and nodded emphatically. "That's right. I'm staying here to keep you company." My mom shot me a playful glare and muttered something about not needing my company, but she couldn't hide the huge, brilliant smile spreading across her face. My dad was more direct. "What about Isabella?" he asked. "Is she still in California by herself?" Isabella and I had moved not long after we got married. She had never spent much time with my parents. They were practically strangers to each other. I told them plainly that Isabella and I were getting a divorce. After a long silence, my mom finally sighed. "As long as you're happy and healthy, that's all that matters." That night, lying in my childhood bed, I slept peacefully and had sweet dreams for the first time in years. I took a week off from work. I spent the whole time with my parents, taking them on little day trips around the state. I hadn't seen them smile so much in years. My new life in Denver was peaceful and comfortable. For Isabella, back in Los Angeles, things were very different. She found out I had sold the house when she went there looking for me and rang the doorbell, only to get no answer. Just then, the real estate agent arrived with a couple for a showing. That's how Isabella found out the house was on the market. She started calling my phone over and over again, but every time it went straight to voicemail. Next, Isabella went to my old office, where my manager informed her that I had transferred back to my home state. Her voice trembled as she asked when I had put in the request. My manager answered without a second thought. He submitted the paperwork on his birthday. After she left my office, the events of my birthday must have replayed in her mind again and again. She couldn't understand it. All she had done was forget my birthday and ask for a sham divorce. How could that have prompted me to suddenly pack up and leave? Isabella decided there had to be something she was missing. She needed to find me and get the full story. That very day, she bought a plane ticket to Denver. But when she landed, Isabella realized she couldn't remember where my parents lived. So she went to my new office to find me, but the receptionist there told her I was on vacation. Isabella tried to contact my friends, but as she scrolled through her phone, she realized she didn't have a single one of their numbers. She didn't even have my parents' phone number. It was in that moment that Isabella finally realized how little she actually knew about me. She had no choice but to check into a hotel near my office and continue calling my phone, hoping I would eventually pick up. I don't know how many times she called before I finally answered. "What do you want?" I asked calmly, out of habit. Her voice immediately took on an accusatory tone. "How could you sell the house?" she demanded. "What am I supposed to do now?" I feigned confusion. "I'm sorry. Wasn't I the one who bought the house years ago?" Isabella had mentioned wanting a house of our own, so I had worked endless overtime, busting my butt to close deals, and eventually I had saved up enough to buy the house we lived in. I had wanted to put her name on the deed back then, but she had refused. "Isabella," I said, my voice firm, "that was my house." Before she could respond, I continued, "I've already retained a lawyer to handle the divorce. If you have any questions, you can direct them to him." And with that, I hung up. I didn't wait to hear what she had to say. I found out Isabella was in town the next day when the police brought her directly to my parents' house. I stared at her sitting on our living room couch, completely baffled as to what she was trying to accomplish. My parents tactfully announced they were going for a walk, leaving us alone to talk. I looked at her, my expression neutral. "Was there something you needed?" My question made Isabella's eyes well up with tears. "Davis Miller, you're so cruel," she cried, selling the house and leaving without a single word. I couldn't help but laugh. "Isabella, isn't a divorce exactly what you wanted?" I asked. "I was just giving you what you asked for." "I never wanted a divorce," she shot back immediately. "You're the only one I've ever loved." At that, a sarcastic smile touched my lips. "Is that right?" I asked. "Is hurting me how you show your love? If so, it's a kind of love I can do without." Isabella opened her mouth to argue, but she couldn't find a single word to say in her defense. It seemed she was finally beginning to understand the true extent of the pain she had caused me. After a long silence, she finally spoke, her voice hollow. "I only ever want to help Leo. I never meant to hurt you." It wasn't that I liked him or loved him. It was just some kind of lingering obsession from when we were young, a feeling of unfinished business. This was the first time since Leo had re-entered our lives that Isabella had ever tried to explain her feelings for him. But it was too late. I didn't care anymore. I just looked at her, my expression blank. I just grunted noncommittally. My lack of reaction left her speechless. I sighed and said, "If that's all, you should probably go. It's hot out. I don't want my parents to get heat stroke." Isabella seemed shocked that I was kicking her out. She just stared at me, dumbfounded. I opened the front door and waited. Finally, Isabella admitted defeat and left, her head hanging low. I thought that would be the last I'd see of her. But to my surprise, she rented a small apartment just a few blocks away from my parents' house. Every day, she started leaving containers of homemade food on our doorstep. My mom, unsure of what to do, asked me how to handle it. I glanced at the containers and said, "Just leave them there. She'll eventually come and get them." My cold indifference didn't seem to deter Isabella at all. She stubbornly continued to bring different meals every single day. Eventually, she started bringing little desserts too. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. I waited for her by the door one evening. When Isabella saw me, her face lit up. She held out the container to me and said, her voice soft and cautious, "Honey, I made ribs and broccoli tonight, and I made some cream puffs from scratch. Please just try them." I took the container from her hands. The hopeful joy on her face grew even brighter. But then I walked the container straight over to the garbage can at the curb. I glanced back at Isabella, who was staring at me in confusion, and then I dropped the entire container into the bin with a loud clang. It hit the bottom, and Isabella's eyes instantly filled with tears. "Why would you do that?" she asked, her voice choked with emotion. I replied coldly, "Your actions are disrupting my life." Isabella stared at me, stunned. "I was just trying to be nice to you," she stammered. "I don't want this divorce." Her words didn't move me in the slightest. "You're wasting your time," I said. "There is no future for us." Tears streamed down Isabella's face. "Why can't you just forgive me?" she sobbed. "You're the one I love." I let out a short, cold laugh. "Maybe so, but I'm done loving you." Isabella stared at me for a long, hard moment. Then she slowly turned and walked away. A few weeks later, my real estate agent called to tell me the house in LA had been sold. The buyer had paid the full asking price, no questions asked. When I received the electronic contract to sign, I saw the buyer's name, Isabella Thompson. I didn't ask any questions. I just signed the papers and waited for the money to come through. Life went on day by day. It was a simple life, but I was happy. About a month later, I got a call from an old colleague back in LA. He told me that my old house, the one I had just sold, had been burned down in a fire. I was shocked. He said the police suspected it was arson, started by a child. The first image that popped into my head was of Annie. After I got off the phone, I looked up the news online. It was her apparently. Isabella had been very cold and distant with her. She refused to let Leo or Annie into the house. Annie had decided that Isabella had turned into a bad person. She wanted to teach her a lesson, so one evening after Isabella got home, Annie lit some papers on fire and threw them into the backyard. The wind was strong that night, and the flames spread with terrifying speed. By the time Isabella got out of the shower, the house was already engulfed in flames, and she was trapped inside. She died in the fire. Because of her age, Annie was only given a warning. Leo, however, was hit with a massive fine for negligence. I was surprised to learn that, as the previous owner who had been wronged, a portion of that settlement was awarded to me. I donated the entire amount to a children's charity. Not long after that, I saw a news headline that Leo Carter was being prosecuted for child abandonment, which had resulted in the death of his daughter. I read the headline and just kept scrolling. All of that was in the past. My happiness was right here, right now. "Davis, dinner's ready. Your dad made your favorite barbecue ribs." "Coming," I called back, jumping up from my desk and hurrying downstairs toward my happy new life and my favorite ribs.